lovers, it is GSwiz here, and I'm here today to talk about some creepy and dark books. If you guys might be wondering why I'm wearing the same thing I did last week, it's because, yes, I'm pre-filming this. October is the busiest month of the year for me. It is not only the birthday month of Camilla and I, but it is also the time where I plan the parties, but then also because the spread of that not good sickness, it's dying down, which means work is picking back up, which means my job has gone back to normal. My work-life balance is not as strong as it was. While I do have some hectic months in my work schedule, October is just one of those months where so much is happening. Pre-filming is the way that I need to go at the moment. First of all, before we go into this, it's Camilla's birthday week. Everybody say hi to Camilla and happy birthday to him. I dare you. No, I'm gonna make you do it. Without further ado, let's get started on with the books. Starting off with Forest of Souls by Lori M. Lee. Now, this book, it looks creepy. Like, look at the cover, okay? Sometimes I look at this cover and I'm just thinking, wow, she's really intensively staring at me. But also this book is really creepy. To add to the creep factor, there's a spider on the spine. If you do not like spiders, then please proceed with caution when it comes to this book. There is a creep factor when it comes to the spiders, but also there's a little bit of a creep factor when it comes to soul magic, and it's pretty fascinating. I'm not gonna lie, like, I usually am a chicken when it comes to creepy books. I never usually reach for creepy books. That's starting to change now. I think it's not because that I want creepy books, it's because I like dark stuff. I like it when fantasy and when other books go a little bit darker. If you were wanting something that is a very creepy read, but also not too terrifying and not too scary, but also kind of pretty terrifying when you think about the premise, then yeah, Forest of Souls is your book. I think that Forest of Souls is a perfect read for this season. Now, this one is more of a dark one than a creepy one, even though there are some pretty creepy people in this book series. Yeah, we're talking about the Villain series by Victoria Schwab. I wasn't actually originally gonna put this on this list, but then I was reminded of it yesterday when Camilo and I were talking about his story idea and how I tend to draw some inspiration with my female villainess kind of characters from Victoria Schwab's writing, especially in Vengeful. I loved Vengeful so much. I understand why people do not like Vengeful. Vengeful is what made me love this series. Victoria Schwab, in my personal opinion, does the best with her second books in the series. I still need to buy Addie LaRue. And that's probably another really creepy book to recommend during the season. But I've got to recommend the Villain series because this is the series that I have read. And it definitely does have kind of a high creepiness factor to it, but also a very dark factor to it. And I really wish that I could see this adapted, but only in like the best way possible. Speaking of like adaptations, oh my goodness, I just heard the news that Victoria Schwab got a pitch picked up by Netflix. How amazing is that? I was technically reminded about this book because I had the conversation with Camilla yesterday, because we were talking about characters and what drives them, what motivates them to do terrible things. I was talking about Vengeful yesterday, and this really brought it to the forefront of my brain. Now I'm just really thankful for the series because I love the way Victoria Schwab ends up driving her characters in this series, and I just really want to reread it now. Another pretty creepy book that I have got to recommend. It's a pretty dark one, and it's by Haruki Murakami, and that, my friends, is After Dark. This one is fascinating because it only really takes place in a short period of time, and I literally read it within a few hours on a work day. It's under 200 pages, and it's set in a very creepy setting that has to do with nightlife, and it's probably even more creepy because it's a fear that especially us women kind of do have in real life that we'd probably become victim to. It's terrifying. Like, just thinking about this book and thinking about what happened in it, like, I needed a breather at some points. Like, After Dark was just a really intense book. So if you're wanting a very good, intense book by Haruki Murakami, it's After Dark. A lot of Haruki Murakami's books tend to be on the slower side, but After Dark is a different situation. This one is definitely a lot more fast-paced than his other ones. It also has a very good dark and creepiness factor to it. It is very applicable to our common fears. Now, I'm also gonna bring up Serpent and Dove because I personally found it creepy. I understand if people are gonna be like, oh, you found Serpent and Dove creepy? You're a real chicken. Yeah, I probably am. I personally found it very creepy on both sides, like when it came to the witches side and when it also came to the religious side. This was triggering to me all round because there's a lot of religious abuse in this book, and it really did trigger me in a lot of ways, and I had to take a break from reading this book a lot of the time. I understand that a lot of people are so focused on the romance because, you know, the romance is kind of a big deal in this book, but there are so many dark underlying themes in here that were just so triggering to me personally. I see this as a completely creepy read, and so at times, yes, I do want to pick up Blood and Honey. I do want to reread Serpent and Dove, but I have to remember, proceed with caution, because as much as, yes, you know, like it was pretty entertaining, there's a lot of creepiness in here that I really couldn't handle, but I survived Serpent and Dove. Let's see if I can survive it again. But yes, that's what I have to mention as a creepy read. I know a lot of you guys will disagree, but for me personally, it was definitely very creepy, very triggering. Final book I'm going to mention before I'm going to mention a few manga series. Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I could also mention Daughter of Smoke and Bone because that was definitely a very creepy series, but I actually don't really remember almost anything about Daughter of Smoke and Bone. So what I'm going to do instead is probably reread that series eventually because I need to remember what that series was like. But with Strange the Dreamer, I loved romance in here, but not only that, creepiness factor I thought that I couldn't handle because it was definitely terrifying. Like when I read this book, I wasn't reading magical realism on a frequent basis. Like I didn't like magical realism. It wasn't necessarily my favorite genre at all, not even a go-to genre. Now I really do like magical realism and I'm happy that my tastes have evolved. At the very same time, I was actually pretty scared that I was going to be creeped out by this book, and I was a tiny bit because, you know, like the second book's called Muse of Nightmares. You guys know Sarai's character and her power. It has to essentially do with her tormenting people in their sleep, and that's terrifying. And so seeing those scenes of her having to do that really did scare me, you know? Like, not like in a way that I'd have nightmares from them, but it was just very overall creepy. Like I just felt like my skin was crawling every single time I read those passages. I'm just like, oh my goodness, like poor Sarai. That's what she has to deal with in this book. She has to try to control that. And I love Laszlo because he's so pure and he's so lovely to Sarai and he accepts her. He accepts her and it's just so beautiful. But anyway, the point is this book is really creepy and it's comforting at the same time. It's so weird to describe Strange the Dreamer because it's a comfort read for me, but at the very same time, it's really creepy. And so if you guys are wanting something that's a little bit creepy with like a lovely character that is Laszlo Strange and a beautiful soul that is Sarai, I definitely recommend Strange the Dreamer. Going into manga, and we are going to be mentioning Demon Slayer. If you guys have at least watched the first episode of Demon Slayer, you know the creepiness factor of the series. It's very much like extreme. Like I get it. It does definitely classify as shonen for good reason. But at the very same time, it kind of does feel like a seinen. Why did I include Demon Slayer? And I not include Berserk. No. Sorry, Demon Slayer. We're coming back to you. Berserk! This series is creepy incarnate. Okay, if you want a good, not just creepy read, if you want a Halloween read, Berserk is your read. The whole story and the whole concept of Berserk is a great analogy for fighting your demons in real life. And that's essentially what Guts does. He fights demons all the time. And it is so dark. I mean, yes, I just did mention Demon Slayer, but this is just a whole nother level of darkness. And the reason why I do love Demon Slayer is because there are so many characters in here, and the author of the manga is very much good at bringing backstory to every single one of these characters, including the villains, including the side characters, and they're amazing. When it comes to Berserk though, it's a little bit more different. I mean, you don't necessarily get the backstory of everyone, you more get the backstory of everyone who is significant to the plot because there's so many people in this series. And unlike Demon Slayer, which is more episodic, this one is an overall big plot that kind of continues on. It kind of makes me feel like I'm reading just a regular book series and I'm not reading manga that is episodic. I appreciate that. I actually prefer Berserk, or the style of Berserk, over any other manga style. It's like definitely one of my favorite series of all time. Compared to Demon Slayer and the next one I'm going to mention after this one is not suitable for all ages. I mean, I probably recommend you start Demon Slayer at either 14 or 15, but this one, I recommend you're over 18 to read because it's just really heavy. I mean, it really depends on your maturity level and what you can handle, but there are a lot of crazy themes in here. I was very hesitant going into the series, but the overall theme of just constantly moving forward and just keep going and just fighting through all this pain, because at the end of the day, sometimes all you have is yourself, but also you have something to fight for, you have a life to fight for. It's just all of this everything about Berserk. I love. If there's one series that I'm absolutely thankful to my partner Camilo for recommending, it's Berserk. Like, it's his favorite manga series. It's now my favorite manga series. I love it. We are both trash for it, and I would highly recommend it if you were wanting a good Halloween read. But anyway, getting back to Demon Slayer, if that sounded cool to you, but if you wanted to start off with something a bit more easier and a bit more tame, even though it's not really that tame, it's still pretty dark. Yeah, like, I definitely recommend Demon Slayer. If you were wanting something that sounds pretty similar to Berserk, but is definitely very different, it's kind of more episodic, and it kind of definitely does feel like a shonen, even though it does have a lot of seinen themes. I didn't even binge read Death Note this month yet, as I'm speaking. But you know what I've done? I've gone out and binge read Demon Slayer and the next manga that I'm just about to mention, The Promised Neverland. So I'm currently around 14 volumes into Demon Slayer. I'm currently around 8 volumes into The Promised Neverland. The reason why I'm only 8 volumes into The Promised Neverland out of the 16 that I own is because I had to stop at volume 8. I was really creeped out. I think sometimes you often forget the high stakes in this series. This series looks like it's gonna be very wholesome and it's gonna be fun and stuff, like maybe Neverland, you know, does that have to do with like Peter Pan and stuff? And I realized that this is kind of an analogy for the book of Joshua in the Bible. I only realized that because it is the total opposite of the Promised Land. It's the Promised Neverland. The Promised Neverland is technically not necessarily like what they're trying to fight against or trying to escape to. No, it's not that. That's not the title of anything in this book series. But it is a fascinating title for the series because you instantly start to think of either Peter Pan because of Neverland, but then that's not the case at all. It's actually trying to give you a biblical analogy, but the total opposite of a biblical analogy, because you're going from thinking about Promised Land to actually the Promised Neverland. It's like, okay, well, there's a big wall and we've got to do whatever we can to take this wall down, or we've got to escape from this place, and it's the total opposite of what you want. It's not promised. These kids are doomed. Let's just say that. And I really don't condone James Dashner's works at all, to be honest, because like, as much as I did enjoy The Maze Runner when I was younger, I do not support the dude after hearing what he allegedly did. So I'm not really going to endorse The Maze Runner here, but I am going to say if you have read The Maze Runner or if you've watched The Maze Runner movies, if you like that creepiness factor, that kind of dystopian nostalgia, it's that, but just as creepy. You don't know what's beyond the wall. There's a wall. It's crazy. And then you start to find out how corrupt everything is, and things just get darker and darker. Volume 8 was just too much for me to handle. Not because like it was even scarier, but once again, I think as I keep on reading the series, reality hits. The kids are in a situation where how they are treated is so cruel. Yeah, no, you know what? I need to hold my tongue here, because if I continue on with talking about this, I will spoil not just where I'm at now, I will spoil season 1 for everyone if they haven't read it, but let's just say it's complete dystopian. Seeing how far I am in right now, this world is fascinating, but I cannot handle it at times. I never really had to put Demon Slayer or Berserk down as frequently as I've had to put The Promised Neverland down, and that is saying something. I used to love dystopians. I think this manga reminds me why I loved dystopian ones. So I guess that's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. I hope you enjoyed my creepy book recommendations. If you did enjoy this video today, book lovers, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Joined the amazing community of book lovers. Also, I have social medias. I'm at gswizzelbooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also at GOODREADS. That's www.goodreads.com/gswizzle. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
Started out with half and I flipped it into double. Started out with half and I flipped it into double.